If you Google my name, you'll find one result. A court record from 1967. Case number 67-4012. First-degree murder. Sentenced to life without parole. I was 18 years old. I'm 75 now. I spent 53 years behind concrete walls, steel doors, and razor wire. I ate 11,000 institutional meals. I slept on a mattress thinner than your yoga mat for 19,000 nights. I watched the world change through a 13-inch television bolted to the wall. And I'm telling you something that will sound insane. Something the system doesn't want you to hear. Something that took me half a century to understand. Prison didn't ruin my life. The life I was living at 18, that was going to kill me. Let me take you back to 1967, Memphis, Tennessee. I was 18. Angry at everything, running with people who were angrier. I carried a knife because everyone carried a knife. I drank because my father drank. I fought because that was the only language anyone ever taught me. One night in November, outside a pool hall on Beale Street, a man said something to me. I don't even remember what it was. Might have been nothing. Might have been everything. It doesn't matter. Because 30 seconds later, that man was on the ground, and he never got up again. I took a life, a real, breathing, irreplaceable human life, and I'm not here to minimize that. I'm not here to make excuses. That man had a mother who screamed in the courtroom. He had a little daughter who grew up without a father. I carry that weight every single day. It sits on my chest when I wake up. It's the last thing I feel before I sleep. But here's what I need you to understand. The boys I ran with in 1967, the ones who didn't get caught, the ones who stayed on those streets, every single one of them was dead before 35. Gunshots, overdoses, liver failure. The streets ate them whole and didn't bother spitting out the bones. If I had walked free that night, if that judge had never said those words, I would have been next. I know this the way you know your own name. I was a dead man walking at 18. The cell saved me, not because it was kind, because it was still. The first 5 years I was an animal in a cage. I fought guards, I fought inmates. I spent months in solitary, talking to the walls, punching concrete until my knuckles looked like raw hamburger. I hated everyone. I hated myself most. Then something happened. A prison librarian, an old woman named Miss Edna, maybe 60, glasses thick as Coke bottles. She pushed a book through my meal slot during a solitary stretch. Didn't say a word, just slid it through and walked away. It was a dictionary. I thought it was a joke, but I had nothing. No television, no radio, no human voice. Just 4 walls, a dim bulb, and a dictionary. So I opened it, and I started reading. A, B, C, word by word. I read the entire thing in 11 days. Then I read it again. When I got out of solitary, I went to that library and I never left. Over the next 48 years, I read over 4,000 books. Philosophy, history, psychology, literature, mathematics. I taught myself things that no school in Memphis would have ever offered a kid like me. You know what prison gives you that freedom never does? Time without distraction. Out there you are drowning in noise. Your phone buzzes, your boss emails, your rent is due, your social media tells you that everyone is winning except you. You never sit still long enough to ask the only question that matters. Who am I when nobody is watching? I had 53 years to answer that question. I sat with myself in silence for decades. I couldn't run from my own mind. I couldn't numb it with alcohol or drown it in work or hide it behind a career title. I had to face every ugly thought, every shameful memory, every cowardly instinct, and I had to make peace with all of it, or go insane. Most men in there go insane. I went inward. By year 20, I was teaching literacy classes to younger inmates. By year 30, I was mediating conflicts between rival gangs in the yard. By year 40, the warden, a man who once put me in solitary for 6 months, asked me to mentor incoming prisoners. I found purpose inside a cage. Not despite the cage, because of it. And here's what breaks my heart about you, about the people watching this right now. You're free. You can walk outside anytime you want. You can go anywhere. And yet, you've built your own prison. You've locked yourself inside a job you despise because you're afraid of what people will say if you leave. You've chained yourself to a mortgage, a car payment, a lifestyle that requires you to sell 40 years of your life to maintain. You have the key in your hand, and you won't turn it. I got released 8 months ago, 75 years old, walking out those gates with a plastic bag of belongings and $200 from the state. You want to know what hit me first? Not the open sky, not the cars or the buildings or the phones everyone stares at. The noise, the spiritual noise. Everyone out here is panicking. Everyone is performing. Everyone is terrified that they're falling behind in a race that doesn't have a finish line. I watched a young man in a coffee shop have a breakdown because his content didn't perform well. He was shaking over numbers on a screen. I thought, brother, I watched men get stabbed over a cigarette, and you're dying inside over a like button. Let me tell you what I know, what 53 years in a concrete box taught me. You don't need more time. You need less noise. You don't need a better strategy. You need a harder question. The question is not, how do I get ahead? The question is, ahead of what? Toward what? And who told me to run? Every young man I mentored in prison, the ones who made it, the ones who walked out and never came back, they all had one thing in common. They stopped performing for an audience. They stopped trying to prove something to people who would never love them anyway. They got still. They got honest. And they rebuilt from the inside out. I killed a man when I was 18. That fact will never leave me. I owe a debt I can never repay. But I tell you this, the version of me that walked into that prison, violent, empty, desperate for respect he hadn't earned, that version died in there, and something better grew in his place. I'm not telling you to go to prison. I'm telling you to stop avoiding the one thing prison forced me to do. Sit with yourself. Get quiet. Stop filling every second with productivity and performance and panic. Ask who you are when the audience disappears. I live in a halfway house now. I share a room with a man who snores. I eat simple food. I walk to the library every morning. I read. I write letters to the daughter of the man I killed. She's never written back, and she doesn't have to. I sit on a bench in the park and watch pigeons. And I feel something I never felt in 18 years of freedom. Peace. Real peace. Not the peace you buy. Not the peace you earn. The peace that comes from having nothing left to prove. Nothing left to protect. Nothing left to perform. They sentenced me to life. But I didn't start living until they locked the door. I don't expect your pity. I don't deserve your admiration. But if you're out there right now, running yourself into the ground chasing something you can't even name, I'm asking you to stop, just for a moment, just long enough to hear the silence. The silence is where you'll find yourself. I found myself in a 6x8 cell. You can find yourself anywhere. You just have to stop running long enough to look.